All right, welcome back. Today, we're diving deep into the human body for a really mission-critical journey. We're going to explore the incredible engineering of the male reproductive system. And listen, this isn't just some boring list of parts. It's a story of production, maturation, and delivery, all for one absolutely vital purpose. So, what does it really take to launch a mission this important? Well, it's a whole process. It involves a high-tech factory, a really tough boot camp, a superhighway, and this incredibly sophisticated launch sequence. And the whole thing is orchestrated with unbelievable precision. Okay, let's get right into it. Our story kicks off right here, inside this factory. This is ground zero for the entire journey. This is where the precious cargo for the mission gets manufactured. And it sets the stage for everything, and I mean everything that's about to happen next. So, let's start our tour at stop number 1, the production factory. And like it says right there, this is truly where the mission begins. This is the biological foundation, the very place responsible for creating the next generation. Now, before we get in too deep, here's a quick look at the main players in our story. You've got the testes, that's the factory itself. The epididymis, which is kind of like our boot camp. The ductus deferens, that's the superhighway. Then there are the accessory glands. Think of them as fueling stations. And finally, the penis, the delivery system. We're going to hit every one of these stops on our tour. So the heart of our factory is right here, in the testes. And you can think of them as having two absolutely critical jobs. First, inside these tiny, winding tubes, they are constantly manufacturing sperm. At the same time, they're also a hormone plant, pumping out testosterone, which is the chemical messenger that really drives this whole operation. Now, this is really cool how this factory is protected. It's got 2 layers of security. First, you have the tunica vaginalis. It's like a lubricated sac that lets the testis move around freely so it doesn't get injured. Then, right underneath that, you've got the tunica albuginea. This is a tough, fibrous capsule that gives the testis its shape and divides it into these organized little production zones. But here's the catch. This high-tech factory is, well, it's sensitive. For sperm production to work the way it's supposed to, it needs a very specific, carefully controlled environment. And the biggest factor here? It's all about temperature. And this is just a perfect example of the body's elegant engineering. The scrotum basically acts as a climate control system, and that dartus muscle, that's the thermostat. If it gets too cold, the muscle contracts, which wrinkles the skin, reduces the surface area, and holds on to heat. Too warm, it just relaxes, smoothing out the skin to let that heat escape. It's simple, but it's an absolutely perfect biological machine. So, the cargo has been manufactured under perfect conditions. You think they're ready to go, right? Well, not quite. First, they need to be trained and prepared for what's ahead. So, welcome to our second stop, sperm boot camp. This boot camp all goes down in the epididymis. For several weeks, the newly made sperm travel through this really long coiled tube. And in here, they mature, they get the ability to swim, and they're stored, just waiting for the call to action. Seriously, they go in as cadets and they come out as elite operatives ready for the mission. All right, our operatives are fully trained. Now they need 2 things, a high-speed transportation network and, of course, the right fuel and supplies to get them through their journey. This right here is the superhighway, the ductus deferens. You might also know it as the vas deferens. Its thick, muscular walls are designed for one thing and one thing only, fast, powerful transport. During ejaculation, it contracts like crazy to launch the sperm forward from storage and onto the next stage of the journey. But look, the sperm can't make this trip all by themselves. No way. They need protection, they need energy, and they need some kind of liquid to travel in. This is where the accessory glands come online. They are our critical fueling and supply stations. And what's so fascinating is that each one of these glands has a very specific job. The seminal gland adds this fructose-rich fluid. Think of it like high-energy rocket fuel. Then the prostate gland adds a milky fluid that activates the sperm, basically giving them the go signal to start swimming. And finally, these little bulbourethral glands secrete a clear mucus that lubricates the path ahead. Put it all together, these fluids and the sperm, and that's what makes up semen. So the cargo is loaded, it's fueled up, and now we're at the final stage, preparing the delivery system for launch. This whole thing involves some pretty complex hydraulics and a very precise command sequence from the nervous system. The launch vehicle itself is built around 3 columns of special erectile tissue. The 2 corpora cavernosa, those are the main engines. They fill up with blood to create the rigidity of an erection. But that single corpus spongiosum has a totally different but just as vital job. It wraps around the urethra to make sure that the pathway stays open and doesn't get squeezed shut during the erection. And get this, the launch is controlled by 2 different parts of the nervous system. An erection is a parasympathetic response. That's your rest and digest system. It relaxes arteries so blood can flow in. But the actual emission and ejaculation, that's controlled by the sympathetic and somatic systems, your fight or flight and voluntary control systems. They cause the powerful contractions needed to expel the semen. It's a perfect example of completely different systems working together in perfect sequence. Okay, so we've toured the factory, we've seen the launch sequence, but why does understanding this blueprint actually matter in the real world? Well, it matters because this anatomy is directly tied to your health. And here's a pretty powerful reason why it matters, especially when we talk about one of those glands we just visited. Prostate cancer is the single most common visceral cancer in men over 50. Just knowing where the prostate is and how it's nestled right in the middle of this whole system is the first step to understanding why screening and awareness are so important. This slide just connects all the dots so well. Benign prostatic hyperplasia, or BPH, that happens in the prostate's transition zone, and it squeezes the urethra, causing urinary problems. Prostate cancer, on the other hand, often develops in the peripheral zone, which is why a doctor can sometimes feel it during an exam. A hydrocele? That's just fluid building up in the tunica vaginalis. Remember that protective sac around the testis? And a varicocele involves the venous plexus, which is part of the system's plumbing that helps cool the testes. It just goes to show how issues can pop up anywhere in the system. And that's a description you're probably not going to forget. A varicocele, which is when those veins around the testis get dilated, is often described by doctors as feeling like a bag of worms. It's a really memorable sign that's directly linked to a very specific anatomical part. And finally, knowing this blueprint makes a lot of medical procedures just click. A vasectomy, for instance, is a really simple and effective form of birth control because it targets one specific piece of that superhighway we talked about, the ductus deferens. By tutting or sealing that tube, sperm are blocked from ever reaching the fueling stations. You're basically stopping the cargo before it can ever be loaded for launch. So, from a microscopic factory all the way to a precisely controlled launch sequence, the male reproductive system is just an incredible biological blueprint. Our bodies are full of these complex, fascinating maps. The only real question is, what part of the blueprint should we explore next? Thanks so much for joining me.